Hey, everybody. We are about to jump into this episode where Jen and I are going to be giving you a diet and fasting update for 2024. Lots of things haven't changed. Several things are changed a little bit in how we're thinking about it. We're going to give you some practical pointers on the three most important things that we think that we need to have in order to live an optimal life where chronic metabolic disease is delayed as much as possible. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Future of Medicine podcast. I am your host, Dr. Aaron Wenzel, and I am joined, as always, by the lovely and talented Jen Justice.
Hey, Doc.
Hey, we made it.
We made it. Look at us.
Look at us. We are in our brand new office space,
So
which happens to have a brand new, beautiful podcast room.
Yeah.
And so I hope it makes our podcast even better.
Mm-hmm. I think it will.
Maybe it'll make us smarter.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. This episode is all about diet. I say that, but we talk about diet all the time. I think this is more of a diet update, and I'd like to really focus our energy on talking about the way that we believe most humans, most of the time, should be thinking about eating so that they could live their longest, best life, defined as a long time with high levels of health. And in order to do that, you have to delay chronic disease at all costs.
Yes.
Primarily metabolic disease, which leads to cancer, heart disease, dementia, those kinds of things. And we strongly believe that a fasted lifestyle, whatever that might mean for the individual, is the underpinning of how, as a human, we should be thinking about structuring our meal plan.
Yes.
Don't you agree?
Yeah. And the good thing is that a lot of our new members coming in, I mean, our existing members, we've kind of coached up
Sure.
on intermittent fasting, but I feel like there's so much content and, good and bad, but there's buzzwords around it that most people initially know what it is, or in some fashion. They may just need a little help with the details, but that's inspiring and encouraging to me that more people are adopting that.
Yeah, it very much is.
Yeah.
And anybody who's listened to our content, I mean, this is probably the fourth year in a row that we do an annual update, and fasting is a part of it. What's interesting is I do have some new thoughts about it, and I hope to share just as an update here. I'll start by saying, what is fasting?
Yeah.
And I think fasting, the way I define it, is greater than 12 hours of not consuming any calories.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it intermittent fasting is that you do eat from time to time, which does break the fast. The thing that I think the primary change year over year for me is I'm less excited about longer fasting beyond 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So our conversation today really is focused on not eating at least 12 hours every 24,
Mm-hmm.
but not going beyond 24.
Yeah.
And I think, number one, that does a couple things. Number one, it allows time for us to consider these longer 3 to 5 day fasts and really the benefits versus risks, be more thoughtful about that. But I think it eliminates a lot of the overwhelm and fear that some people might have towards taking on fasting and exploring it, because it's like, gosh, I don't know that I ever, even if it was good for me, I don't know that I want to do 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
So that kind of like stop before you even start.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say 12 hours at least, no more than 24. I don't have hard science on this, but it does seem to be that most thought leaders in this space think that maximum benefit is around that 16-8 split.
Yeah.
Which means in 24 hours, you begin and stop consuming calories all within 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's interesting to me. The primary concern we have for longer fasting beyond 24 hours, I mean, it's all over the news. It's everywhere. There's some real concern with loss of lean mass,
Mm-hmm.
what we call sarcopenia, where
Yeah.
we lose lean muscle. And what we do know long term is that a life with delayed metabolic disease is a life that's rooted in adequate and optimal lean mass.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a not so fast, I
Yeah.
think. Isn't that what you would say that too? Or?
Yeah, I don't know who said it. and I wish I could credit them, but one of the sayings I've heard in the past is muscle is the currency of health. And I really love that because it puts that concept forward in my brain when I'm thinking about my nutrition, when I'm thinking about my workouts, when I'm just kind of thinking about my lifestyle in general, is how can I build more muscle? Because I'm 50, I'll be 53 in April. How can I build more muscle, and how can I keep the muscle that I have? So I feel like, yeah, what you just said is so true.
Yeah, I've not had such great language, but I do like that. I've always just said, the human experience is based on a musculoskeletal infrastructure, and like, how could your muscles and bones not be a critical component of optimal health?
Right.
And so I think there's just a lot of attention, and it makes me happy on lean muscle. It is, I think, culturally, we can very easily become obsessed with weight. And a Wenzelism around here is weight is a theory. The more you weigh, theoretically, the less healthy you are. The less you weigh, theoretically, the healthier you're getting, but not so fast. If you're losing muscle, short-term metrics might make you feel good, but once you stop doing the behaviors that are leading to the short-term metrics, you now progress in your life with less lean mass than you started with, which is very dangerous. So that's super interesting. I think one of the primary benefits of fasting, there are so many, and we've talked at length about them, but it eliminates a couple things right off the bat. It eliminates complexity in your decision making through the day. You eliminate a third of your food related decision making through the day, and we only have the ability to make so many good decisions in a day. So I think it's a great hedge against decision fatigue, and we're all being challenged to make more decisions. And so that's a good thing. It also singularly removes 1/3 of the opportunity of you sitting down, consuming things, which net results in your ability to control total volume in a much more precise way. And I think that's just useful. I guess the last major thing is that it gives you 12 to 16 hours every 24 to, I don't want to say heal yourself, but just let your body do its own biology and your own biochemistry work through the imperfections of your behaviors. It kind of covers the multitude of little sins through the day. With enough time, your body kind of sorts it out. It's what we're designed to do. So I think that's it. It's just a super easy framework, right? To control for decision fatigue and to control for total volume and caloric consumption. And I'm interested in coaching people to minimize overwhelm. What's been some of your big takeaways this year on that?
I agree. I think for a lot of our members who are busy entrepreneurs, they're busy business owners, moms of those business owners that have families, it's so easy to kind of get tied up in the minutia of what to eat, when to eat, all of that. And it just eliminates a third, like you said, of that decision making, which makes it super easy. For most people, it's as easy as just skipping breakfast, if we're going to get tactical about it.
Get quick tactics.
You don't need to overthink it, but just, I come from a breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Kind of grew up in the late 70s and 80s, and the grape nuts.
I'm not quite that old.
Grape nuts kid, thanks.
Just kidding.
You're getting there, though.
I know.
But, just you got to eat as soon as you get up. And for a lot of people that I talk to, interestingly enough, they're not hungry first thing in the morning. Like, they'll want their coffee or, maybe want to get in a workout, but they're not hungry until later on in the day, which really works to their advantage, because then when they are hungry, they're going to be ready to eat and their body's going to be ready to accept that. So for most people, skipping breakfast is the option that they'll choose. Now, we do have a few people that I know I've worked with that they prefer to actually skip supper, which is interesting to me. And I tend to be one of those people. You know, I would rather eat breakfast and have lunch.
Oh, really? I
and
didn't know
then
that about
skip
you.
supper, because I tend to eat supper early anyway, and so
Yep.
I would want to sleep through the hungriest part of my fast, I think.
Mm.
So I've done that on occasion before. But really what you want to do is focus on the bookends of that. You don't want to skip lunch and eat breakfast and supper, because that's not going to give you enough time in that fasting
It doesn't give you a
window.
fasted window
Yeah.
that we're looking
And
for.
I do hear people say that a lot. Well, I skipped lunch. Well, but you're not giving your body enough time to reset, as you were just explaining. So, and this is really rooted in keeping your blood sugar and insulin levels stable and low when you're not eating.
Yes.
So you're going to obviously have that rise when you do eventually eat, which is normal. But we want to delay that as much as possible. So if you do skip lunch, you know, your body's going to take about 2 to 4 hours to kind of process breakfast, have that blood sugar and insulin rise, and then you're going to go, you know, a few hours in a fasted state, and then eat supper. It's not enough.
Yeah,
So
I
you
mean,
have to-
maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We're going to talk
right?
about snacking a little bit later, but again, the more at-bats you take with making decisions around food, the more you have to hit the ball.
Yeah.
And I just find, and my experience tells me, personally and with our members, that minimizing the at-bats increases the probability of making great contact.
Yeah.
And achieving the goals that you're trying to achieve through diet. The second section is what we're going to talk about in this update is really focusing on, let's call it giving protein its due, making an intentional prioritization of protein intake on top of a fasted lifestyle. I think, you know, there are 3 macronutrients, right? Proteins, fats, and carbs. We all know this. And none of them are good, bad, right, or wrong. They just are. And we're omnivores, and we have the ability to survive eating all of them. But for the most part, if our goal is to delay chronic metabolic disease, which we would define as being rooted in insulin resistance, then eating in a way that kept blood sugar as stable as possible for as long as possible is the grail.
Yeah.
And because with blood sugar elevated, insulin is released. And once insulin is on the scene, we are mapping towards metabolic disease.
Yes.
And so while we could choose to eat anything because we are omnivores, it does create this dilemma, often referred to as the omnivore dilemma. If you can eat anything, what do you eat? And the answer is it depends. It depends on what your goals are. In terms of if your goal is to live a long time and delay chronic disease, our belief is that if you, out of the 3 macronutrients, if you prioritized your protein intake during your mealtime, there are several massive benefits by doing so. We walk through some of what those are, what some of the recommendations are, and you know what that looks like.
Well, ideally, for women, we usually recommend about, is it 60 grams of protein per day?
Well, for the super
And
nerds,
again, it depends.
It's 0.5 to 1 gram per ideal kilogram of body weight. So
it's a lot of math.
It's a lot of math. If we say the average woman is 120 to 130 pounds, and that would be the average ideal body weight for the average woman, then rough math says 60.
Yeah.
But again, that's just to maintain, right? So
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit between maintaining lean mass and this effort to like grow lean mass.
For me personally, I probably started out at about 60, just by happenstance.
60 grams.
60 grams of protein per day. I'm at 145 right now.
Come on.
So
Wow.
I had to really work at getting
You've
that.
been working hard on
I remember
that.
telling my trainer, I can't get 100 grams of protein in a day. And he was like, why? You know, I don't understand that. All you have to do is do this and this. And he kind of made some tweaks, but it just seemed like so much protein. And now I'm like, I could eat, you know, more if I really wanted to. But I kind of think of it for me personally like I look at every meal, how protein forward is this?
Mm-hmm.
So when I am ready to eat, I eat lunch, I make it protein forward. So, lean chicken on a salad, or hard-boiled eggs, something like that. But I have it pretty planned out to where, and I track it in MyFitnessPal, which is an app, but I have
Mm-hmm.
it pretty planned out. What I noticed personally for me is that when I started strength training and really focused on that, and when I increased my protein over time, number one, my workouts got better, so I could lift heavier. Number two, interestingly enough, my weight stabilized to where I was weighing the same over the course of probably 3 to 6 months, but my clothes were falling off because I was losing.
Your composition was
my
changing.
body comp was changing. So I really had to let go of that diet mentality of the scale, and that was hard. That was another transition I had to make. But just by doing that little tweak of increasing protein and not really focusing on any of the other macronutrients helped a lot. The other benefit of it is satiety. So I know an analogy that you like to make is like at a Mexican restaurant, because everybody loves tacos.
Yeah.
They put the basket of chips down in front of you, and you can eat like 2 baskets.
I mean, they're limitless.
Yeah.
You could just continue to eat them.
But if they were to put like a 32-ounce steak in front of you, you would probably only eat
You could only eat so much.
a third of it, because that protein is so satiating and takes a little longer for I think your body to break down as well and digest.
Yes, satiating defined as there's an off switch.
Yeah.
Your brain eventually says, I'm done here.
Yeah.
Very difficult with fried, salted, simple carbohydrates. I haven't found an off switch. The off switch is usually abdominal pain and discomfort
Exactly.
because you've just overshot the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For men, just to back up on that, 100 grams of protein per for a man would maintain, right?
Yeah, minimums for
minimum.
maintenance.
Yeah.
If you had ambitious lean muscle gaining goals, that might even need to be up 50%, potentially even double, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But this sheds a whole new light on, like, if we're saying lean mass is underrated and we need to be thinking about this in a way that where we can eat and move our bodies to create the largest amount of sustainable lean mass possible, I think it takes a lot of the religion out of dieting and puts it more appropriately on the long-term goal, which is I want to live a long time and feel really good and preserve optimal health as long as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know, but for me personally, it's a lot more freeing to think about what I put in my mouth when I understand that this will either get me closer or further away to my long-term goals, which I'm very connected with.
Yeah. What about snacking? I know a lot of our members ask about that, because I think one of the maybe misnomers about protein is, well, your body can only absorb so much at one sitting. Like,
well, specifically around protein, I think I don't have this fully settled yet.
Yeah.
There are some people who I admire a lot, who talk a lot about there's a diminishing return on protein intake at one serving. In other words, your body only has the ability to absorb so much protein at any given time. And eating all 100 grams of protein in one meal would be better suited to space that out over. And I'm not totally all the way, transparently, I'm not totally all the way through that science.
Yeah.
I understand that there are a number of people who hold that position. And if we were only talking about should we chunk down our 100 to 150 grams of protein into 2 or 3 meals, and that was the only thing we had to manage as humans, and that was the only thing that we were struggling with, then I would say, let's start there. The challenge I find is that if I tell someone I need you to chunk your protein down into 3 or 4 meals through the day, what often gets heard is I need to eat 3 or 4 meals a day.
Yeah.
And it isn't always protein that's going in their mouth.
Right.
And so, again, it's complex, but not really. And so taking protein intake aside as a separate, unique conversation, I think it would be very interesting to think about and experiment chunking down your protein intakes over the course of your feeding window,
Right.
as opposed to all in one sitting or in 2 sittings. That's interesting to me. I'll just speak for myself. I have a life that is really structured where I don't need to use a lot of my discipline because, frankly, I don't have a ton.
Yeah.
I have like standard issue discipline. I just live in a life where I don't have to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'd probably fail miserably.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would trust myself to say, Aaron, I need you to eat 4 times a day and get your protein in, because 4 times a day would turn into, well, there's donuts, and then there's like chips, and then like, well, maybe I can have some snacks, and then some this and that, and then I end up just grazing.
Give yourself permission. Yeah.
It's a very slippery slope for me personally.
Right.
And as someone who gets hired to help people think about their future, when I explore this with them, many people identify with that same kind of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it safer to just eliminate snacking.
Yeah.
If there's some diminishing return on your 100 grams of protein in 2 meals, as opposed, it would be more ideal to do 4. I'd rather minimize the upside of the protein optimization than have to manage all of the potential fatigue and consequences of poor decision making while I'm eating all through the day.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Right.
And I would encourage people to think about it that way,
Mm-hmm.
if it makes sense for them. We're designed to go long periods of time under physical strain and load, and then eat once or twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's just from the dawn of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, eating 3 meals a day plus snacks is completely a post 1950s mass agriculture, world of abundance, first world problem.
Yeah. Right.
And I just think the more at-bats you have having to make decisions around food, the more you increase the probability of making slightly less than ideal decisions, which then create bigger downstream problems.
Yeah. I agree.
And then you layer in the multi-billion-dollar with a B food industry,
Mm-hmm.
who is incentivized to sell you things that are snacky.
Yeah.
With whatever headline, fat-free, whole grain, like whatever the buzzword is,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Heart
matter.
healthy.
Heart healthy. Most people aren't equipped to discern and fact check.
Yeah.
And these are big companies that
Mm-hmm.
have shareholders to answer to, and their motive is not health. Their motive is to sell more things.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then you have the big pharmaceutical industry, where they serve their role, but their interest again is to shareholders,
Mm-hmm.
and selling more pharmaceuticals that treat the diseases that are being fueled by metabolic disease. It doesn't take a ton of work to see the interconnectedness of this. And I just think, and again, back to like, fasting is so great because it just eliminates all the noise, and it
Yeah.
tends to get really quiet
Mm-hmm.
when I only eat twice a day. This is the window, and I don't snack.
Yeah.
Like, and I give a priority to protein first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are subtle but very significant shifts that are absolute multipliers of effort and energy and time and resources.
Yeah.
I think the last section, after prioritizing protein, prioritize real over not real food.
Right.
As a general saying, if it wasn't food 100 years ago, it's not food, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as a caveat, I'm not anti all processed foods. I'm just pro prioritization of real food.
Yes.
I don't think it should be I don't think fake food should be a replacement for real food. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some cases, and you and I have been in these situations with these severely diseased, severely obese, where we need a hostile takeover and we are sprinting towards a massive bad outcome.
Yeah.
And we need to turn this thing around fast.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a useful tool
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario. And it can be useful to augment protein intake if you just can't get the protein in. But as a general thesis, I always prefer some more farm to table than factory to table.
Yeah.
Like it just, and I think for most people that makes sense.
Yeah. It takes a little more effort, but it's so worth it. I mean, I'm a convenience girl. I love convenience foods. However, I feel so much better when I don't consume much of those. And I do utilize protein shakes, but in a way where I can get my protein in certain situations. Like I will consume one after a strength training workout. But that's pretty much it. I don't live on them, which is
And as someone who lives side by side most of the day, 5 days a week to you, you do consume some protein shakes, but they are almost always when you get back from your workout.
Yeah.
But you almost only eat real food. And it's a tool that you're using, but you're not building your diet around protein shakes.
Yeah. No.
Tie all this together, Jen, for the listener who maybe is like a light bulb is going off. Like, can you tie all this together about fasting, protein, real food in a way that is actionable and not overwhelming for someone who's listening? Just give them a couple of things to do, or just summarize everything we've talked about today.
I think in summary, eating in a way, and this is something I've had to wrap my head around fasting, is number one, you can use it for weight loss. But if your goal is primarily for weight loss, I would encourage you to shift that into more of a longevity thinking pattern, where the root of the chronic conditions that we're trying to delay revolve around your metabolic health. And we're talking about your brain, your heart, your cancer risk. I mean, those are big deals. And so, making sure that you look at it that way, that, this is for the long, I'm playing the long game around fasting. This is not something I'm going to do to get into the dress for the cruise.
Even though it can be.
Right. And not judging, but, maybe.
But when you make that the primary driver.
Yeah.
I think that's where it can go sideways.
Yeah. But controlling, and we've talked about this before with what you eat, and we've touched on what you eat in this podcast, but when you eat, start with when you eat. If you make one change, just start with when you eat.
That's a good reminder.
Pick a meal that you're going to delay, whether it be your first meal of the day, breaking your fast, or you choose to end the day without eating.
Well said.
Choose that first, and don't get caught up in overthinking this. It's not meant to be overthought. It's meant to be easy. And I think there's so much noise and so much. The problem with the diet culture is that they make it harder than it has to be. I count my macros. Absolutely, I do, because I want to control my carbohydrates right now. I want to get an adequate amount of protein. I don't really focus too much on fat, but I kind of like that. I make it a game of like, how can I, and I want to make sure I'm hitting my targets every day. So for me, what I don't measure doesn't get managed. And so I like tracking my food in an app. I like, doing that for me personally. I've had a lot of success doing that. And I've seen great results doing that. But for the average person, start with skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
Or break your fast with lunch. It doesn't have to be the first meal of the day. We're not, like you've said, we're not really meant to eat all throughout the day. And then cut out a snack here or there. Just start with a little step and see how you feel after that. And then you can really tune it in and hone it in and do some more advanced things with it. But cut out the processed foods in your diet. Really take an audit of maybe 2 weekdays and a weekend of what you're eating, and just write it down in a notebook, and then look at it and say, oh gosh, there was snackable cookies there, or, frozen pizza that night, or whatever.
And notice how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. But really, again, everybody's on a diet, right? We use this word diet kind of loosely with weight loss, but everybody has a diet. It just depends on how high quality it is, what is it serving you
Yeah,
and your goals.
it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. I think that's a great place to wrap this up. It's this is there's a reason we talk about this every year.
Yeah.
And even if we didn't say anything that was life changing for you as you're listening, I think it's a good reminder. And we believe in this very deeply, and we think it's one of the pillars. How you feed your body is one of the health pillars. How you feed it, how you move it, how you recover. These things just matter, and as long as you're on this planet, they're going to matter.
Yeah.
Your goals may change, your situation and details might change, and you might need to. That's why the answer almost always for you, it depends.
Yeah.
But
right.
as a general thesis, a fasted lifestyle is a superpower.
Yeah.
That can take any shape or form that you need it to based on your unique situation and goals. But we couldn't be more encouraging to have people explore that for themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.